Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. We are all smiles today. Because I'm joined by Kevin Graham, old school Kev, and Quinny as well, often called the mighty Quinn. Here he is. And there's loads to discuss, gentlemen, but we'll be doing that with a Celtic state of mind, an angle on Celtic and how things affect Celtic rather than focusing on another club. I want to start off with the weekend though, gents, because we can't just airbrush that out of the discussion. And I think we'll probably all share the view that we were horrendous in the first half. But what I'm going to ask you, Kev, I'll come to you first, right? Yes, we're all in agreement. That was a really, really poor first half. Yes, we can touch on European hangover and all that. But my question would be, the guys that have come in for a start, Kev, what does it say about them in terms of the depth of the squad, the quality of the squad, that we can't go to Easter Road and get a result because they were hooked unceremoniously at half-time?
I'm not going to lie. I didn't have any complaints about the changes that he made. I kind of expected those to be the changes that were made, and I wasn't really surprised that they were hooked at half-time. I was surprised all three of them were hooked at half-time, truthfully. But they were all ranked rotten, and he could have hooked maybe another 3 or 4 players in that first half as well who weren't up to spot. I thought Kuhn was having I was having a look at Kuhn and go, I could hook you as well in that first half. Look,
I think he would take you though, Kev. He's got a steely look about it. If you're going to give him a hook, I'm pretty sure he would deal with that.
The changes were half-time at warranted, but I think it was a poor team performance in the first half, and I think they were sort of made scapegoats because of what we had on the bench available to come in. The second half was far, far better. I really did think we deserved a draw. I think the second half performance meant we did deserve a draw, but the first half we were dreadful, and we can talk about what we're going to talk about further in, but one of the main reasons that we didn't win that game was because of our poor first half. And it's very easy for supporters to jump to the wild conclusion that Greg Taylor was in the huff because he was dropped in Munich. And I've seen a lot of commentators jump to that conclusion. And I actually saw an expert, I think it was Marvin Bartley, actually says that after the game as well. He says sometimes it happens with a player. He says he might not be too happy getting lit, not playing the game before. And that's in his mindset. I don't think that's true. Mind you, I don't know. I really didn't. I think that's an easy conclusion for us to make. But
it's good to hear it from an ex-player though, Kev. I always like to hear that type of insight from a player where we all say, that would never happen. And then an ex-player comes along and says, actually, he maybe is, feeling a bit in the huff. So I quite like that level of insight.
I think with Greg Taylor, it did look as well, like it was quite clear. Like I thought watching the game, he looked like out of his depth in that match. It wasn't really as if he played a bad game. It was shit. Excuse the language, sorry. But like it was really uncharacteristic for him where it was just like it didn't even seem like off the level. It was really bizarre. Sorry, Kev. I just wanted to say that
you're right though. You're right in relation to that because we've always had that. It was almost like a caveat. Greg Taylor might not be good enough for Champions League, but we're quite happy with him domestically. And I agree with Quinn. He looked all over the place, Kev. I mean, there was a moment where he got a booking. Right, and Granty on the co-column says he's lucky to get a booking. He was well over that. And that's because he'd lost the ball. He'd lost the ball that you should be able to retain and find a man with. So I agree with Quinny, and I don't know the reasons why, but we're speculating around the reasons why, as is Marvin Bartley. But it didn't seem on it at all.
You've got to have a look at a player's insight there. You've got to have a look at Bartley's insight there. He's maybe done it himself. He didn't mean to do it, but everybody does it. They're human beings. You can have a slightly off day at your work when you're completely annoyed at something your gaffer says to you the day before, and you go in that following morning in a stinking mood, and you're going to go, I'm going to show him, and that happens. And for me to say it doesn't happen to football players, so it could well be true. What I've kind of noticed was in the second half when Schlupp came on. The guy Campbell and Muller didn't have the run of their right-hand side. They couldn't handle the big man's physicality. The big man pushed them back as if to go, you're no overrunning me. You're not going to get the freedom of this side the way that you have done in the first half. It was good second half. I can't complain about the effort that the team put in. We didn't start well, lost an early goal. But the second half was fine. We move on. Game on Tuesday night. That's it. That's bottom line.
We will look ahead to that. Like you say, when you get an ex-pros kind of take on things, I always find it really interesting, Quinny. But another thing Kev said there is in relation to just normal day-to-day jobs where we can all behave like that. You add in the level of competitiveness within a group of footballers, then I think it actually heightens the possibility that might happen. And obviously, his future's up in the air as well. JP Mason said about a couple of players over the years, if your head's out the door, your feet can follow. And, we've heard that in the past. And players who haven't really had the same kind of interest or seem to have the same interest, body language, demeanour and all this kind of stuff. But based just on his performance, Taylor, there was something not right with him. He was really, really poor. And he was taken on at half time. And I agree with Kev as well on the point of Schlupp. Now, the discussion after the game, Quinny, was around, bold move by Brendan to make 3 subs. Doesn't do that very often. I think he made 2 in Atalanta. No, sorry, Dortmund. He made 2 against Borussia Dortmund at half time. He doesn't often make the three changes at half time, but he realised that we were terrible in the first half. But what does that say for the rest of the season in relation to Taylor and Schlupp for you, Quinny?
I think it's hard because, like I just said, and there's a wee bit of pushback in the chat around. I'm Taylor's biggest fan probably when it comes to doing this kind of stuff, and it was like, so it's like watching a youth player or like a January signing that hasn't bedded in yet or something. It was a remarkably weird performance from him, and I wasn't surprised to see him subbed off at halftime. I think it does. I think it's really interesting because we do need to sign a left back. It's kind of maybe a little bit forgotten, because we know Tierney's coming, but Taylor won't be here. Schlupp obviously isn't planned on being here at the moment, so we all know we can't run with Tierney for 60 games a season. It's just not going to be the way it goes. So, what can you do progress-wise to look after next season? Well, maybe bleeding in someone from the youth team. That's probably not going to happen. The only other thing is give Jeffrey Schlupp audition time, really. And from the positives that we've seen from him, I don't think that would be a bad move necessarily. I do think Taylor, in the system and must-win matches and stuff like that, you could maybe just about rely upon him a bit more to help us win matches. But from what we've seen already, a Schlupp, his strength is certainly Taylor's weakness in terms of just defensive power and just kind of some raw attributes in that sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if Taylor's next appearance was maybe his last or his second to last or something like that. Maybe a home game or two where he gets a wee time to get subbed off and get a wee applause from the crowd. There'll probably be a cup final on the way before he leaves as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was kind of limited we see him now, but that all depends on Rodgers. Rodgers might not care about anything like that and just play the best player for the match. So,
Quinny, see, when you're talking about it, the player that springs to my mind is Chris Commons, right? Now, I know the kind of relationship between Celtic fans and Chris Commons has changed since he retired from the playing side of things, right? But remember, he was at Celtic for an entire season under Brendan Rodgers and never played a single game. You remember that, right? And then they loaned him out to Hibs and all that. And it wasn't that he was unfit throughout that entire season. And people were saying, "Oh, he's been a great player for us under Neil Lennon, scored all the goals and all this." And he was, by the way. And this is something that maybe with hindsight we will look back on and say Chris Commons was a cracking signing for 300 grand. But he wasn't given that. You're right. He wasn't given that kind of opportunity to say farewell to the Celtic fans. And then we played remember we played a bounce game. Was it like Lubo's Legends versus Henrik's Heroes? And Chris Commons played in that game. I was watching with interest the McAvenny podcast. Frank McAvenny's got a show where he interviews, people he's met through the game, etc. And he was chatting to Andy Walker, another one whose relationship, I guess, with Celtic fans has changed somewhat since he retired as a player. And he was talking about the treatment of himself, Kev. I don't know if you've seen it, from Liam Brady. Did you see it, Kev?
I've seen it.
Did you see that?
I've seen it. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, man. See, if a manager, honestly, and it sometimes just takes one thing. That's it. You've had it. Liam Brady basically made Walker's life a misery. He said that I'm not going to pay you unless you take this loan deal to Falkirk on Motherwell and all this kind of stuff. He made them go and play and train with under 18s. And whoever the manager was instructed, you put Andy Walker on in the last minute of the game. He was a sub for the under-18s. And I remember thinking that because it's not as though we had a goal scorer that was scoring 20 and 30 goals under Brady. And then there was Walker, and he was getting treated like that. So managers can do that. I don't think it would be based on performance that Brendan Rodgers would do that. It would be more kind of down to an attitude thing where he would banish him from the squad. But I do still think he'd be a handy backup between now and the end of the season, Kev. But I'm with Quinny on this one. For me, Schlupp's our left back at the moment.
On form-wise, yes. I do think Rodgers will still use Taylor. And we've got to use him. He is a decent player. He had a bad 45 minutes on Saturday. The majority of the team had a bad 45 minutes on Saturday. It just so happens that the 3 guys that were taken off have been actually hung up on the door as scapegoats. They've been skinned basically and like hung up, gone. There's the blame game there. There's the 3 of them there. And it's quite difficult to see past that. On form-wise, Schlupp starts, yes. But then you've still got that. He's still settling in. I think Rodgers is still says that we've still got to watch his fitness because he hasn't played a lot of games. We didn't want to run him into the ground and like basically lose him for a period as well, which can easily happen for guys who arrive in January that haven't played a lot of football. Rodgers will use Taylor. Look, he had a bad 45 minutes. He had a really, really bad 45 minutes. McCowan had a bad 45 minutes. Idah had a bad 45 minutes. Callum McGregor had a bad 45 minutes. Nicholas Kuhn had a bad 45 minutes. There was a whole load of them there had a bad 45 minutes. There was a drop. There was a drop in the level. You look when we lost that goal in Munich. The amount of players that were on the deck, absolutely gutted. They go Easter Road. It's probably our hardest away game that we've got between now and the end of the split. We were caught off guard. We had a poor first half. Didn't get up to the levels. Hibs smelt it. Went for it. I think 2-0 flattered them at half time. I really do. It was such a poor goal to lose just on half time. But what really annoyed me in the first half was we had an awful lot of the ball, and the amount of times we got caught offside. The amount of times they were leaving a gap for us to run into, and our wingers just got caught offside. And it wasn't because the ball wasn't getting, for me, it wasn't because the ball wasn't getting played quick enough. It was because we weren't on it mentally. We were lazy. We weren't looking across the line. There was one point on the coverage that says Hibs' line is great. I had a look at it and I'm going, they're all over the shop. I went, if we just hung back, if we were a wee bit on it mentally, we're in behind all the time. We were just missing something in that first half. There's a whole load of factors in that. There really is a whole load of factors in that. And I'm putting it down to the gut punch that we got in Munich. And that's allowed. That is allowed. They're emotional human beings. So
that'll play its part. That'll play its part, Kev. Absolutely. I mean, we're going to be talking about all the big decisions, Quinny, and our take on them as well. We'll also be talking about the fact that earlier this season, Acsom made a prediction. The prediction was around Brendan having all the moves. And there he is, having a wee game of chess with the latest Rangers boss, who he has seen off, Quinny. So we'll be talking about that as well from myself. That's a belter. Look at that. I love AI. Look at that. AI's not great at hands yet, but it's getting there. Also, take a wee look at the Acsom blog. Kev is getting in on the action. This is Kev's latest blog. The Munich Files, where he's able to talk about Rambo, Schlupp and Edson Bra fight, all within a 500-word essay. Go and check it out. The link is underneath this video. I love that. Look at that. Oh, my God.
That's great.
It's brilliant. AI rules, by the way. My favourite AI is this. AI's no good enough, though. That's obviously skillsy. AI's no good enough to produce that. That is never going to be produced on AI. That's just raw. That's Anton Rogan. So half-time, and we were bold, and you're looking at the team that comes out and plays in the second half, and that's the team that played against Bayern Munich. And that's also what's leading me to believe that that's probably Brendan Rodgers' favoured starting 11. And I know that you play certain games in a different way, but domestically, in the league and in the Scottish Cup, I think that's going to be our strongest 11 going ahead and moving forward. I like the response, Quinny. I mean, we talk about character and all this kind of stuff. I like the response to the team. Second half, we spoke about it in the group chat. I think Celtic done enough to get a draw. in the second half, and you've got to come away from that and say, look, we were rotten in the first half, and to ship that second goal just before half time, almost criminal. You don't do it, but the team did enough for me to pull it back. Let's not forget that, and let's have a look at some of the performers. And I want to start off with Idah and Maeda. Am I right in saying that's 22 goals now for the season? Unbelievable, mainly from the wing. And at this moment in time, he was neck and neck, I think, with Kuhn. And I was thinking to myself, a wee bit of recency bias, pushed me towards Maeda. I think over the piece, Maeda is in the running for Player of the Year at this stage, Quinny. And he pops up with a couple of goals at the weekend. One, of course, was chopped off. But he's still putting in that performance. He was brilliant in the second half again. He's closing down, getting into the positions, those positions that Liam Carrigan told us for about the last 2.5 years, he found very natural to get into. But yeah, you felt sorry for him because I think he did enough to come away with a draw. And that goal again, we'll come to it and we'll look at it and scrutinise it. But Idah and Maeda, Quinny, another great performance from the wee guy.
Yeah, I would make him favourite for Player of the Year at this point. He's clearly been the main guy. And I wouldn't say, I don't know, at the beginning of the season, he wasn't obviously going to be that guy, but he's became that guy throughout the last month or two even when Kyogo and Idah were in the building. Neither one of them was overly firing on all cylinders. Kuhn was in and out of the team with some injuries and whatever. He's just always played. In the league, it's 24 games, 9 goals, 7 assists, 4 goals in the Cup, 4 goals in the Champions League. I think that makes 21. Goal contributions maybe push it a bit higher to the 30 mark, assists and whatever. But yeah, it was great character for him as well throughout this game. I'd seen him in centre forward in this match, but it was actually pretty frustrating because, like Kev was saying, in the first half, Hibs, their line was a lot higher, and we had that space to play in the channel and in behind them. And when we made that change second half to take Idah off and put Jota on, Hibs just then retreated back into that ground, and then we were resorting to a lot of balls getting chucked into the box for Dyson to try and get on scraps and second balls and stuff, which is kind of eventually where the goal comes from in a roundabout way. But it still felt a little bit kind of haphazard to me in terms of trying to correct the problem of the match, because Idah wasn't great. Him and Jota had his moment as well where he probably should be. I say he should be passing it rather than shooting there. So we were creating openings and chances and all the rest of it, but we just really did lack, especially in the first half. Just it felt like presence of awareness. Actually, we're here playing a game of football. This isn't you just show up and it's just going to be an easy win kind of thing. It's not one of those. It's never one of those games. Very rarely is it, but it was big character for the second half to kind of bring it back to level terms and whatnot. But I think Hibs, to kind of get back to what I was meaning to say there, Dyson didn't look that great, the centre forward at the weekend, because he was just buried in amongst a back three and in a tight block with the midfield. And yeah, there was still some good kind of tempo and everything else, but the whole point of Idah is, and we've seen he did get 70 or 80 minutes in recent matches, is to make sure if we come up against that, we've still got someone that can play with it. And I know Idah's not got this mad aerial prowess or anything like that, but he's still a bit of a unit. And when you're throwing those balls into Maeda, a lot of them, they were just bouncing back. I was doing the statistics on Celtic here yesterday looking at it, and the Hibs defence have got an obscene amount of clearances and blocks in that match. And a lot of it came in the second half when we've just been hitting balls off them, basically, trying to get into the box. So I forget what I started with that, but I think I think Brendan will probably prefer Dyson in the centre forward role, against them in the Derby, Cup finals, that kind of vibe. But I still think Idah's still probably going to be, air quotes, first choice to play most of the matches at centre forward. I think Rodgers likes the strength and depth he has at wing at the moment. If you start with Idah in the middle, is what I'm finishing on.
Yeah, no, I'm also having a wee look to my left here, because this is where, watching the game, you're taking notes of moments that might be talking points and discussion points. You also get a sense of who's giving the ball away, Quinny, and who's retaining possession. Because I'm bringing this up for John Gilmer in relation to Greg Taylor. John, if someone plays in a certain way and it's evidence-based, it's nothing to do with bashing Greg Taylor. He lost the ball consistently throughout the first half. Brendan Rodgers obviously agreed and hooked him. And Yang wasn't playing, so I can't comment on his performance. But that was because I think the team that was playing in the second half, Rodgers believed that they could win the game, actually, because he was talking about momentum. But it's not about bashing Greg Taylor. Absolutely, it's not. You watch every single episode under Ange Postecoglou and tell me how often he was bashed, and that's because he was playing well. So it comes down to the performance of the player. It's got nothing to do with agendas. But he didn't look right, and a lot of people are agreeing with that in the comments section. Let's bring some of the comments in. Missing Bernardo, this is an interesting one because he's, for me, the least used midfielder this season. He's the guy that will be feeling a wee bit hard done by with his game time. Because I think that, when we signed him for 3.5, I think it was, I was looking at that thinking it was a great bit of business, an absolutely brilliant bit of business. And he, for me, is ahead of Luke McCowan in the pecking order. That's no bashing Luke McCowan. He's just a better player. And for, to not have him for the last few weeks and for the next week or two, it's a big loss, Kev, but it kind of is going under the radar, Bernardo, because he's not really started as many games as I would have expected this season. But I do think that he's a loss, particularly in a game like that at the weekend where he probably would have started over Luke McCowan. Are we missing Bernardo?
I think we've got to a kind of situation where Bernardo's cameos weren't up to a decent level before he got injured, and now that he's not here, we're saying that he's absolutely fantastic, where his form leading up to the injury wasn't great. Again, yes, we're missing somebody of Bernardo's quality, but the Bernardo that we want to see wasn't there in his cameos over the last 2 or 3 months. And I think that's been a problem. And I think when we look at it, our away form's not great. But I think that's down to the number of games that we've played, the number of changes that we make. And just the fact is, when you're playing a team at home, if we're just slightly off it, especially away from home, teams can up their level a wee bit. And it's all about work rate and effort. And if they match your work rate or effort, or better your work rate and effort for a period during a game, they can put us in trouble. And I think that's what we've seen in the last 4, 5, 6 away games. With Bernardo, I think his form wasn't as good up until the injury, but you didn't want to lose him for the squad. We do not want to lose him for the squad, and he would have been a good guy to come on, even in Munich and that, even though his form wasn't great. So we're missing his body. We are missing his body there.
So when Kevin is missing Bernardo's body, how about you?
And I definitely agree with the sentiment where, like, you've been missing that extra midfielder to come into the fold. For even this match, you could have started over McCowan and we might have had a different kind of game overall.
Yeah.
Never mind the bench in Munich or even the bench in this game, because the 3 subs at halftime were the only subs that were made. There was no other usage for the bench in that match again past that. So, I think you're definitely missing the depth that he gives, because, McCowan's fine. I'm not going to chuck the baby out with the bathwater on him. I think he's had a good season overall for the small contributions he's been asked to make. And like I did have a bit of sympathy for him getting taken off at halftime yesterday, I must admit, because McCowan's game, like, there's 1 or 2 moments in the match where he wasn't great, maybe gave the ball away, wasn't strong enough in a duel or something like that. But he was kind of just non-existent in the match. It wasn't like he was like Taylor was bad. Like, he was just, like I say, like, just looked like he hadn't played for the team before, hadn't played at this level before. But McCowan was just kind of like, I said this about Engels about a month or 2 ago when he went through a wee spell where people were kind of questioning him. I didn't really think he was ever having bad matches. It was just like nothing happened with him. He was just nowhere near the ball. He was just, it's just a non-entity essentially. So I felt a little bit bad for McCowan in that sense. And Hatate coming on is always going to be the kind of get out of jail free. But Hatate, Engels, and McGregor just clocked the 90 minutes in Munich, like we were talking about here, and not having someone like Bernardo in the building to carry some of that workload over the last couple of weeks, even. We felt it in Munich in spells. We've seen how heavy the legs got in certain moments, and I felt it in this game. That was really the way the match was started. Ultimately, last thing I want to say on the subs, so I'll pass the mic back over. But at 2-0 down, I would have expected Rodgers to keep Idah on and still bring Jota on, because we're losing 2-0, and if people are looking tired and all the rest of it, why not actually go all out attack on it? Like, what are we going to lose at that point, really? So
that was a good opportunity to see that, Quinny. It really would have been a good opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. We've been saying that as well. It's like playing it safe. If you're 3-0 up at home, often it would be nice just to see what that looks like. What does it look like with Maeda and Idah going through the middle? Because that's frightening, particularly with Jota and Kuhn firing. So I totally agree with that. And as you say, we've lost the game at that point. You know, it's going to be a monumental comeback if we get anything out of that game. So why not? And then if you get yourself back into the game, then make the change. You could then take Idah off and then shore it up in the midfield and flood the midfield. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. We are going to get to the big call. The big call, of course, being whether or not Alistair Johnston kept that ball in play. And even if he did or didn't, do we have a VAR system that can give us decisive proof that was the case, and if not, then it shouldn't have been overturned. So we're in a pickle here in Scottish football due to the fact that we don't have a good enough system. So even if we could prove either way, it shouldn't have been changed, Kev. And it gets to that point where we've all seen all the different images and the way that, you know, a still can look this way or that way. Now, I remember the furore over a similar incident where Gary Neville took a football and talked everybody through the rules, where the ball, the actual part of the ball that was touched in the grass was out the park. But if part of the circumference of that ball overhangs the line, any part of the line, the ball's in. The entirety of the circumference has to be out the park. Now, that is, you're talking, I mean, that's millimetres, guys, right? And to rely on a camera on the 18-yard line from that angle to make that call and say the referee has made an on-field error because I've got the proof of that from the 18-yard line, that's wrong, Kev. Now, I'm going to use the word incompetent. I know that there's other words beginning with the C and ending in heat that have been used time and time again in the comment section. The reason I never use the word cheat is because I can't prove it. That's simple. It's simple as that. I could give you my view on that, but I'm going to say for sure, 100%, you can prove incompetence here, Kev. And that was the word that got Rodgers in trouble the last time at Tynecastle. So, you know, he's come out after the game. You've seen him on the park, and he's saying to the officials, half the ball's in, half the ball's in, or half the ball's in. You can read his lips. And then he's called it out to every pundit he's spoken to afterwards. And rightly so, Kev. He might be disciplined for it, but we've got to keep calling this out because let's say, right, the ball is out. Let's start from that position. The ball is out and the goal shouldn't have stood. Can you prove it? That's the important bit, Kev, because if you can't prove that, you can't overturn the on-field decision. That's the issue.
It is the issue. And it's quite difficult. For me at the time, watching it, I was shouting at Engels for playing what I thought was for a heavy pass. I thought the ball was out. When it goes across, it ends up in the back of the net. I went, that ball's out. Then they give it, and I'm like, well, what have I not seen? Because I was too busy shouting at Engels at the point where it overhit pass. Now, I believe that the ball was out. My initial reaction was the ball was out, but I have not seen any evidence whatsoever that makes my thinking that the ball was out true or disproves that the ball wasn't out. I haven't seen anything.
It's like the Jota thing at Fir Park. So because we didn't have the view, it just, you know what I mean? It creates a situation, not of paranoia, but you're questioning the decision because they can't show you the image, Kev. Remember the Fir Park camera was pointing at the hot dog stand or something, and Jota scored that brilliant goal. You know, and it was like, oh, the camera was off, guys. Well, how can you chop it off?
The camera was an Airdrie. Never mind, it was known Motherwell. So I think the ball's out. My initial reaction was the ball out, but I haven't seen any evidence to agree with me or disagree with me.
Right.
And the 3 days that I've actually, the 3 days since the actual game. And that's the problem. It should have been sorted out within 15 seconds. If you've got that goal-line technology, then it's bang, right? That's it sorted. That's it there.
Yeah.
And so that's not there. So we're going to have days and weeks or whatever it is. A folk gone, it was in, it was out, they shook it all about. It should be sorted. It should actually be sorted, Bruno. My gut reaction, and I'll stick with my gut reaction. I thought the ball was out, and I haven't seen anything that has made me change my opinion.
Well, we'll take it from
but that. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything that completely backs up my opinion as gospel either.
We're going to start from that point, Quinny. We're going to start from the ball was out, right? Now, Ryan, the boy, comes in to say, could clearly see on the telly it was over line. Could you? Because I never saw an angle on the TV. The angle I seen was the angle that I think was being filmed by a Hibs vlogger. And I think she was almost on the line. And from that angle, to me, Ryan, remember the ball can be on the grass out the park, but if any of the circumference of that ball overhangs the line, it's in. So, like your avatar there is overhanging our white line. That ball's in, mate, even though the ball's probably sitting on the grass. So this is the issue. So Kev says, right, ball's out, Quinny. And the ref gives the decision. So the ref says, this is a goal. The rule is, if you want to override that and overrule that, you need to show that it's been an error on the field. And they can't show that. And if they can, produce the images. Because they don't have them, do they? We know that they've already said it was from the 18-yard line that they're going by, right? So they can't prove it. Therefore, the on-field decision is the one that has to stick.
Yeah, I think I kind of said this in my breakdown of the match afterwards as well. Like, I'm kind of similar to some of the comments like that. Like, I don't really know what to believe with it being in or out or whatever, but I'm not. It's obviously like pure incompetent again. It's pure bargain shop basement VAR, as we've seen again. All this stuff. Like, I think when it comes to the whole decision of it all, like, if we can imagine for a second that the ball was out. Let's imagine the ball was out and the referee. No, let's imagine the ball was in and the referee said no goal. VAR couldn't even overturn that the other way around to say, oh no, it was in and it should be a goal. You know, that's not. It can't prove anything to any extent. And it is millimeters that we're talking about. If it was the other way around, VAR, imagine they did intervene. If it was the other way around, it would be like, oh, you know, like they're stepping in to give goals now and da. You know, so for them to step over the same line to remove a goal, it's just so much of a reach. It's untrue. But like some people in the chat were saying there, like, it's weird. We know that refs and Rangers have got like a special relationship, and we've seen like some of the decisions that they get over the years, right? But if you speak to general Scottish football fans, they kind of put Celtic in that bucket as well.
They do.
And I don't get it, right? And I think us getting it, if we did get that decision, it would just kind of reinforce some of that kind of tripe that goes around in the background to say that, well, we're in the same bucket as them in terms of getting favourable decisions, which again, any Celtic fan will tell you is very far from the truth. So I don't really know how to feel about it overall. Like, would I have wanted to draw the game on them giving that goal? I don't know. It's obviously been removed from the team, and it's a crime in that sense, if you get me. But in terms of like how I feel about it or what I want done about it, I don't know. I really find it hard to get that upset about it because, like Kev said, we should have won the game anyway. Like, this is like,
this is
stuff.
The thing you say there, it should be, Quinny, what you said there about other fans of other teams saying it's a Celtic and Rangers issue. That does exist. I've had messages on my socials from Hibs, Hearts, Motherwell, and I think Aberdeen fans, as well as the usual. And they're basically saying, you get everything. And we absolutely don't. I mean, there is a dossier that Alan Morrison's been working on in his fantastic blog. We did a show for an hour, which was huge, with Alan talking about that fact. And when, again, you're going on about the fact that you're glad you don't have to, say, oh, we got to draw because of this. I'm going to lead that into the next part, which is when you rattle Brendan's cage and he feels hard done by, Kev, he comes out as a different beast entirely. And we actually experienced that after the furore around the Tynecastle thing where he was called up to the beaks and everything else. So if you want to pull a positive from it, it's rattled Brendan. You could see it after the game. He wasn't happy. He's right up at the officials. That's going to work in our favour, Kev, because he doesn't like getting beat. He takes it almost as a personal slight. He feels hard done by. And I think that's going to bleed into the team as well, because what happened after the Tynecastle game, we went on a run, correct me if I'm wrong, of an unbeaten run domestically that only ended at Ibrox this season. Is that right? That was our last defeat, wasn't it?
Would be correct, aye.
So that's the kind of impact that something like this could have. So if you want to turn it into a positive, that's a positive I'm going to take from it, Kev.
That is a positive. And also, you look at how this team reacts to defeats anyway. I mean, any time that we do lose a game, the club who beats us will release a DVD that game because it makes our season.
DVD, Quinny. DVDs.
Or they'll release it on streaming or whatever they do. They maybe even release Betamax videos. Some of the teams that bet us, the last time some teams have bet us, it probably is on a Betamax video. I mean, that was the first time in 24 games Hibs have beaten us. They'll have a great end of season collection. They bet Hibs, bet us. They bet Hearts and bet us. Drew 3 each with Rangers. That's a magic season for them. Absolutely brilliant season. But you have a look at that. We didn't lose games very often because we do bounce back. And Rodgers used that last season to fire us up on the run-in. To fire us up. And he will do it again because that's what decent managers do. They use perceived injustices and take them forward. And we can only say perceived just now because we haven't seen any sort of evidence one way or the other. What I found interesting as well when you listen to it, like after the game, Arne Engels, and I thought Engels was great in the second half. I thought he was really trying to drive the team on in the second half. He sounded like a Celtic player straight after the game. That's the first time he's ever sounded like a Celtic player, talking about this shouldn't happen. This is not the levels we expect. We can't have Munich as an excuse. And I went like that. Well, that's only took you 6 months to actually realise that's got to be your mindset week in, week out. I think Trusty's struggling with the Saturday, Tuesdays. I think you can actually see drop-offs in certain games with him.
There's a massive distance between his performances, Kev. Very good, very, very poor. Yeah,
he's struggling. I think Engels in the second half, he has struggled away from home, but I think he's now getting the handle on Scottish football. This is what it's like, and this is what you need to be a Celtic player, and that's what Rodgers is really, really good at with this team, and this team is really, really good. It could well be. Yes, we could lose another game before the end of the season because there is going to be. We're 13 points clear. We might take that we might take that wee foot off the pedal. We might get beat. There might be somebody might get a dead cat bounce against us in a meaningless game after the split. It might happen. It can happen. We've all seen it happen, But I don't think we'll lose a meaningful game for the rest of the season. That is, and Hibs have annoyed us. And you're playing us at home in a quarter-final of the Cup.
You are pulling all the positives out of this, Kevin. I like it.
Your DVD's not going to include a semi-final or a cup final, lads.
You know what? I've actually got a Betamax tape on one of my shelves. Believe it or not, right? One of the Celtic...
I believe it.
One of the Celtic... I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was the Celtic Story. You know, that original one that was made around 1967? The guy that actually made it passed away not that long ago. And he got access into the dressing room and all the rest of it. And you've got Jock Stein talking and Bertie. Well, I would like to bring up a wee point here, boss. And they're all acting. Have you never seen it? It's brilliant. It's outstanding. I've got it on Betamax, but I don't have anything to play it on, obviously. Right, let's bring in some of these comments because it's great to get a wee bit of discussion going. And we're going to be speaking to Joe Hamilton on the YouTube. Good afternoon, troops. Brendan absolutely bosses Scottish football. And he can and will say what has to be said. The thing with Brendan is he doesn't say it week on week. He only brings it up when it's absolutely necessary. Barry O'Sullivan, VAR is a joke. Do it fully and correctly or don't do it at all. That's my feeling on it, Barry. I said, I think it was after maybe the Jota incident for Park. I said that Celtic should invest in the top grade VAR, install it at Celtic Park and have a dossier of errors every time we get called up for calling something out. And, you remember how long's the tennis had the goal line, or the line technology? Years and years and years. And it shows you the graphic and you can tell beyond any kind of doubt whether a ball is in or out. It's not, I think there's a big play on the cost of this, by the way. I think that we need a priority in Scottish football. The priority to be, if VAR's introduced, it needs to be the best VAR possible, and youth development needs a reserve league. And these things actually, when in the great scheme of things, are better than buying somebody from Rotherham for 300 grand because the teams are not putting the money where their mouth is. We need that kind of thing sorted rather than just spending money on transfers. That's far more important to the future of Scottish football. Monty, Ferguson unveiled with Ray in a banjo playoff. I'm from Fife, actually. Yeah, I don't own a banjo, but I have seen Deliverance, Monty. And any excuse to bring up a moment that happened during a charity football game, Kev, where Acsom sponsored the Celtic team, right? So due to that, Quinny, I was allowed to play. Now, I remember when I was at primary school, and I hope he's not watching, there was a couple of wee guys who were murdered at football, right? But their dad owned a wine shop. This was primary school, by the way. Their dad owned a wine shop who sponsored the school football team. I kid you not. I've got a picture of it, right? And even the strips, they were Spall. Remember Spall? Kev, you'll remember Spall, right? They were wine-coloured football strips, right? Tops, shorts and socks with just wines across. I'm losing my thread here. But no, the reason the two of them got a game was because their old man sponsored the team, right? And the reason I got a game was because Acsom sponsored the Celtic team. But in the opposing team was a certain Alex Ray, and I think I finished his career. Lawrence Conley witnessed it. It was probably waist high, and I think he wanted a wee bit of afters, but at that point he'd been pulled away by his teammates. So I hope he gets it too, because he's rotten. Jay Conley, Jay Larkin, after all, and a big shout out to those Just Wines. I don't know if you still exist. The 3 changes he made, I'd already flagged up on Friday. All 3 had to come off after very poor 45 minutes, not just by them. Much improved second half, but it wasn't to be. And James Kirwan also comes in. Totally agree with Brendan Rodgers. Was it a guess? Quote, that decision just goes to prove that on-field decisions by the referee or linesman should have the final say over a VAR decision. Will anything change, Quinny? We have been banging on about VAR since it was introduced. It's clearly not up to scratch. The officials using it aren't up to scratch. And it gets tedious. That's why every time we bring up a VAR decision, people in the comments are like, let it go. We've got to discuss it, win, lose or draw, because it's not good enough. I mean, it could happen against Hibs in the Cup in that one-off game, and then your treble's bust. Where does it go from here, though? How can we fix it?
I think, I've always been a big proponent for, VAR. VAR has a purpose in football, I think, especially top end football, if you're going to be the big division in a country or any major competitions, that kind of thing. But it definitely has to have strong leadership in it. I might look a bit tired this morning. I stayed up last night to watch some soccer, would you believe?
Soccer?
And I watched a wee bit of soccer over the weekend. And when they do VAR, they do VAR pretty well over there. And see now, they've been doing it since last year, I think. The ref will turn around, see after he's looked at the screen, the ref will turn around, he's got a microphone that goes to the stadium, and he'll tell you what's happening, he'll tell you what's going on and whatever. And no one's told them to do that. Everyone kind of has, they can run VAR the way they want within FIFA principles or whatever, and it just doesn't feel like there's any leadership. It feels like everything's very reactive. It feels like everything's very after the fact, oh, sorry. You were talking about the Gary Neville thing, right? And I brought that up on Sunday when we were breaking this down. That's the first time I'd seen that little clip, right? Because I just missed it when it happened. But see, if you were a referee, you should have 1,000% know all about that. You should know that instant. You should, that should have been the Monday morning brief that weekend whenever that happened. Mm-hmm. So they should be fully mindful of everything that we kind of discuss after the fact and dig up later. Oh, did you see this one in England or that one in France? Or, so it feels really that's probably it's bargain basement stuff and all that. MLS has obviously got a very good version of it, but there's some countries out there that don't have the top version, that just don't have this amount of issues with it because there's probably strong leadership around it. Listen, we only really want to mess about with red cards and penalties, or we only really want to mess around with, whatever it might be. But there's clear instruction and guidelines, and it feels like this for the most part. That guy that's made that decision at the weekend, he probably feels that he did the right thing with the evidence available to him, but he shouldn't be in a situation where it's unavailable evidence. It's no evidence, no case,
It would be interesting to hear everything around the audio and also look at the pictures that they have made a decision on, right? And at that point, like you say, Quinny, it should be in reference to, but remember, we're talking the circumference of that ball overhanging the line, not being on the line. And just these wee reminders, because obviously, like you say, these things, we can drudge them up and dig them up, but they should have been part of a briefing that week in the SFA and everywhere else. So the frustrations will continue until they sort it out. Jungle Lion says VAR has to produce a still picture of the ball out, or Alan Muir has to go. Simple. I mean, how do we improve otherwise, JL? That's the thing. We've also got Henrik McLarsson coming in. Was my birthday yesterday? Don't ask which one. Happy birthday, Henrik. got an Acsom mug and Kev's Larson poetry book. That's tremendous. The mug has a wee ball in it. Is that a fidget spinner? I don't know. I actually don't know.
Somebody must really dislike Henrik McLarsson buying them my book. Jesus, sorry.
But Kev,
sorry, mate. I'll apologise for that.
It is the only poetry book dedicated to Henrik Larsson ever written. So it is the best Henrik
It's
Larsson
the best.
book of
It's the
poetry.
best poetry book ever written about Henrik Larsson. I can
There you
say
go.
that with some
Authority.
gusto.
Yes.
Gusto, authority.
If you want a copy of said book, they're on the Acsom shop underneath this video as well. So go and have a wee look. And hopefully, Henrik, you enjoyed your presence. I'm sorry to say it, but Idah's first touch is non-existent. A centre forward is required. Loads of comments coming in at the weekend about Idah. And because it's in the emotion of the game, a lot of them are pretty harsh, Kev. And I look at Idah and, you know, I would agree with that there. But I've seen him with a great first touch. I've seen games where the ball sticks to him. My big complaint at the weekend was the fact that if you give him a second to think, he'll make the wrong decision. He's very much an instinctive player. That was my big takeaway from it. But I'm not writing him off. How can we write him off when you look at the entirety of his contribution this season? I'm not writing him off. He was poor. He was poor, and a lot of players around about him were poor as well. But again, and I've said it last season and I'll say it this season, we'll get big moments between now and the end of the campaign from Idah. Big goals.
Aye. He seems to go through spells where he looks rotten, then he looks good. Mm-hmm. There seems to be a bit of a confidence player there. And if something goes right with him in the first 5, 6, 7 minutes of a game, then he's on it. Then if something doesn't quite sit right with him, then he can struggle to get into the game. He seems to score goals in bursts as well. He seems like doubles, singles, and like in a burst of games. I think he's just a big, raw young laddie. And he's got an awful lot of work to do, and I'm sure Rodgers knows that as well. Obviously, folk are going to nail the price tag on him, but the price tag is not his fault. We've got to remember that the price tag is not his fault. Our manager wanted him, and our board made an absolute mess of getting that deal done. Yes, he should have passed to Kuhn in the first half. He should have done that. That probably would have. I think if we equalise, then we won the game quite comfortably. Truthfully, I think if we get the equaliser allowed, we actually win the game. I think we do. But it would have been hilarious.
They were absolutely
hilarious for the momentum.
It's the momentum, Kev, isn't it?
Aye. If you have a look at it as well, I think he's at fault for the Hibs second goal as well. I don't know what he was doing in the box. He was just sort of wandering about. Maybe he knew he was getting hooked. But you can't chuck him out. We've only got 2 centre forwards. It wouldn't surprise me if he starts tomorrow night.
Where's Joey Dawson? Quinny, any idea?
Oh, sorry, we've got Johnny Kenny. So we've got 2 centre forwards with good first team experience. I will say. I think he's a bit like Trusty. He's struggling a wee bit with a Tuesday, Saturday. He's a confidence player. He's a striker. He's a confidence player. Unlike Kyogo. I'm actually saying Kyogo, and I'm emphasising Kyogo because it seems to annoy folk when it's like I'm actually pronouncing it wrongly deliberately now.
The best pronunciation was Angie's. He was brilliant. It was just poetry in motion to hear Ange calling him Kyogo. But what are they annoyed at? The fact that you call him Kyogo?
Mm-hmm. Aye. That's...
Like his first name's Kai.
Aye. I don't. Ella Hussey. I'm never going to top Ella Hussey. I'm never going to top that.
That's the reason he never came back.
Anyway, when he missed chances, it didn't seem to bother him. It didn't seem, if he was not involved in the game, it didn't seem to bother him. With Idah, it seems to bother him. He seems to lack confidence, and he's got to learn not to be too desperate and just let the game flow naturally to him, like he done at Villa Park.
Yeah, he did.
Did.
And that was after the Young Boys, the important goal that he scored against. Well, he forced against Young Boys. You know, he was a big part when he had a goal against Bayern Munich. You know, so it doesn't make sense to me. But I agree with Kerry. It does seem as though he's doing in the dumps at times on that park, and he's trudging along, and the shoulders are over, and his first touch becomes poor. But it's not always poor. But again, that's been an issue for since the beginning of time with strikers, isn't it? It's all about confidence. What do you do with him? Do you continue to play him? I mean, tomorrow night, does he start?
I think he starts tomorrow night. I think on the whole passing to Kuhn thing, and there's been a lot of chat for Jota and the same thing. I'm quite firm on this, and I gave Kyogo pelters for it for years. But if we're not winning the game, you don't need thinking time. You're passing that ball. If we're not winning the game, if it's 0-0, Kyogo was very bad for doing that kind of stuff at 0-0. Obviously, it didn't matter most of the time because we ended up winning. But for Jota, for Idah, there's no thinking to be had. We're not winning. You're passing that ball. That's the end of it. You know, Messi's first goal, bring up soccer again. Same kind of thing. He gets through, tight angle, 1-on-1 with the keeper. You think the best player of all time would shoot, but no, he squares it. Someone taps it in. You know, that's, you know, when you're not winning, you're playing for the team. You're always playing for the team, obviously, but you don't get to shoot for yourself until we're winning. That's kind of my attitude towards all that. But I think with Idah, it looked a lot like 3 months ago when Kyogo was here, and I thought he looked a lot better as soon as Kyogo left because he knew, oh, I'm the forward. I'm going to get to play. I'll show you what I can do. I'll do my best. And now that Maeda is kind of in the forward, kind of the striker, centre forward kind of depth chart now, all of a sudden, maybe he's just got a wee bit of that looking over his shoulder again, like, oh, I need to make sure I keep him out of this position. Otherwise, I'm going to get dropped next week. And I think it might be that maybe holds him back a little bit because when he was on loan at Norwich, who cares if I'm on the bench? And for lack of a better term, you know, like I'm on loan from Norwich. I'm just here to do my bit for 6 months and get my career up and running. Whereas being the full-time guy, it's a different thing. And so that's my own personal like hunch on it all, is like maybe it's the competitive element of the team he's struggling with because he knows he might get bombed out at any moment's notice like he did at half time.
Yeah. And the fact that it's pretty widely known we were trying to get another striker in, Quinny, in January. But, you know, I hope that we start with Idah tomorrow night, because if not, it might harm his confidence a wee bit more. Barry Flaherty, Poundland, VAR. I agree with that. And I think Celtic should invest in our own system. And obviously you can argue the toss away and say that, you know, it's for player data and performance and all this kind of stuff. But you do have the footage if necessary moving forward. When I hear Betamax, the Urban Kulshi says, I think of the Celtic port. Yes, out of touch. Absolutely. Celtic still do their opposition team analysis on a Betamax. I don't think Brendan would allow that. I think he's big on video evidence, video analysis, etc. And John Gilmore comes in to say, if it was the Rangers, a goal would have been given and VAR wouldn't even have checked it. Yes, absolutely. What's all this, John, about bashing the VAR officials, man? Come on. No, I agree with that. But that brings up the fact that we do have a game against Rangers next month, right? And you kind of set it all up, guys, right? You set it all up and it's like, right, okay, they battered us at Ibrox, and that was completely, for me, it was unexpected. And it's the worst we've played all season over the entirety of a game. So you've got that riding on the next game. You want to put them to bed. And they have imploded, Kev. They have imploded. They are currently managerless unless something's happened in the last 50 minutes. And the managers that they are apparently looking at, you know, weren't good enough for Clyde, Celtic Hearts or Alloa Athletic. So moving into this game next month, I just think, you know, in Brendan's first tenure, there was a few occasions where I thought, let's get 7 or 8 against this mob. Right, okay. And that is because I'm a football fan. I think it could all go wrong. It could all go a bit Pete Tong if they don't get their act together. Because Brendan Rodgers, I think there's going to be a run. There's going to be a momentum following what happened at the weekend between now and the end of the season to get the league title, get over the line, and obviously push for the Scottish Cup. And I'm hoping that we can have a bit of revenge against Rangers next month, Kev.
I was always hoping that was always my hope straight after we lost at Ibrox in the new year, that the players have a look at that going, that's not happening again. When you come to our parts, that's not going to happen. And I still think that will be the case no matter who they've got in charge of them when they actually come to Celtic Park. I mean, it would be interesting to see how they actually react, the players actually react from now to the end of the season, whoever comes in. I think it's looking more likely that they're going to appoint an interim than they're going to get took over in the summer. They're going to get called the Red Bull Royals, and they're going to have Mbappe, Salah, and the Moroccan Drogba up front, and they'll still finish third. But so I think there's going to be an interim. You sometimes know how interim works. You get a wee bit of a bounce, and they'll come to Celtic Park saying we're coming back, then we hammer them, then they want the interim out, and they'll start fighting again. So hopefully that will happen. But hopefully whoever the interim is just does enough to maybe get the job. That would be funny. That would be like a bit like Spud and Train Spotting, Just make sure, just do enough though to get the job, but they just do enough to get the job.
29 years since that film came out, Kev. 29 years. I remember going to see it at Robin Cinema in Dunfermline. By the way, your site that you do shows for, Quinny, have reported that Celtic have demanded, I'm just going to read this out, the Hoops have asked for the image and footage that led VAR Alan Muir to his final decision to rule out the goal, with the ball allegedly having gone out of play. So that's on Celtic here. They reported that during this particular show. So we've demanded. It'll be interesting to see if we get it. And this is what I'm talking about.
There it is there.
It's clear as mud. It's clear as mud, that.
The ball's out.
The ball's out.
The ball's out.
Now, it wouldn't have benefited us at the weekend because it was at Easter Road, but in terms of decision making and all that kind of stuff, the bottom line is, Quinny, they're not going to be able to produce an image that's going to conclusively show you that ball was out, and that's a problem. And we're still here talking about it. And by the way, we'll still win the league. And I think it's you call it out every single time. That was the tagline of the show. You're right to call it out. You've got to call it out. Otherwise, they'll just go along with the same terrible system that we've got in place.
Yeah, and I think like the main repercussions for this isn't really benefiting us. I think Rodgers, like you mentioned it earlier, I meant to come back to you on it, but like Rodgers is a football manager. Like how many losses are in his record is like a distinct point of like value, pride, merit, or whatever, So every loss he will be fucking raging about, make no mistake about it, because it's on his permanent record, I feel like. But it's also for like, I had some pushback when I said like, I wouldn't even want the goal or whatever yesterday on Celtic here YouTube. There are people like that, but it's not just that, it's the top 6 race. It's other people Hibs are jostling with in the league and everything else. And I try my best to watch other games in Scotland. I don't do very well with it, I must confess, but I do often hear on the radio or the pundits covering the games, oh yeah, and there was that bad decision at Motherwell yesterday, and oh yeah, that decision for Ross County last week. There is lots of crap that goes on, that I don't see as much. Maybe most Celtic fans don't get total access or exposure to. And it's like, maybe not directly, like we're going to win the league anyway. Like this match is very inconsequential to us, but it's hopefully something you would get the rest of Scottish football kind of backing us up with, because it's a big one to challenge them with, or not even challenge them, but hold them to task on, because there won't be any evidence for it. And you'd hope the other clubs, except apparently a few of them have had repeated ills in this way, similar to ourselves. You would hope they would stand up and go, oh, we're in your corner, Celtic, because we agree. The people that we all agree should run the game for us, appoint the referees and all the rest of it, the SFA, are accountable to us, and we want them to make improvements, so hopefully hopefully the wider footballing community kind of latches into it in that way, rather than it's, Celtic, who cares, man,
What a brilliant point. Whoever finishes 1 point below Hibs, right, it's as important to them as it is to us, and it's as important to that team as it is to Brendan Rodgers' personal record. You're absolutely spot on, Quinny. And by the way, just there's loads of great points coming through, and I've got to thank every single person for being involved. 2,100 strong on this Monday afternoon. We don't have Acsom, but at some point this week we should be able to see the big fella for his views, probably post Aberdeen. And we do have a message from a player who is one of only 30 Celts to play in a European final for the club. So let's hear it from the big man. Some call him Dolph or Drago.
Hi there, Johan here. I'm really looking forward to see you all at Grace's in Glasgow this Thursday. Blast from the past, why not this current season? They're doing brilliantly. Hail, hail, see you all.
Hail, hail. Right, the big man, he's coming to Grace's on Thursday. Kev, you all right with that, mate? You seem a wee bit taken aback. You just scared at his beauty.
I thought he was coming for me there. I thought he was.
It looked as though he was in the same room as you. No, Johan Mjällby is absolutely brilliant. His ex-teammates said that he never had the patter back in the day, but he does now. So he's obviously been working on it. He's coming over from Sweden. He doesn't do it very often, but he is going to join us. We're 2,100 strong in this live stream. There are 40 tickets left. So come along. Let's see if we can get that sold out at Gracie's. The ticket link is underneath this video. Big Johan, Quinny, though, eh? One of only 30 players who have played in the European final for Celtic. Obviously, it was disappointing because we got beat, but the big man also came back and he's got some great tales to talk around. Obviously, the Barcelona 2012 victory, being part of Neil Lennon's management team, and he speaks very well, does Big Johan. Have you ever seen him live, Quinny?
I met him one time in the number 7 restaurant or whatever. He was there. Well, I didn't meet him. He was there, and then at one point they just went, anyone who wants a picture with Johan, get to the front of the room, and everyone just kind of formed a queue, got some pictures and that, some autographs. That's the only time I've been up close and personal with him. Not quite as big as I thought he was going to be. I don't know if that's an age thing or whatever. When you're a wee guy and you see these big centre backs, and then you grow up and then you're like, oh, he's not that much taller than me, but it should be a good one because the thing I love about Johan Mjällby is he was there for his playing career at Celtic was a great section of history, coming in when he did, and then also all the stuff with Martin O'Neill and everything else as well. And it's before TV money and sports science and all the trappings of modern day football. It's one of those last generations of 11 guys and a bit of determination and all the rest of it can conquer Europe.
Yeah. And we almost did. Did, Quinny. And then you look at the quality of the team that beat us as well, which I think is massively under the radar. That was a team that went on to win the Champions League the following season, and we were so close that night. Johan was part of that, and because you are listening today, 2,100 of you, if you enter the promo code Acsom 1888 at checkout, you will get a discount on your ticket as well. Can't I say any further than that? Kevin Graham, and the ticket link is underneath this video, as is the blog that Kev contributes to. And Liam has just written a blog about Johan's debut. Kev, can you remember what the score was?
5-1 against Rangers.
Against Rangers, absolutely.
The last ever Celtic Rangers game, that was at 3 p.m. on a Saturday.
That's bizarre, isn't it? That is bizarre.
It's proper trivia.
That is proper trivia. Who was in goals, Kev, for Celtic?
Oh, Tony Warner.
Of course he was. Aye. Tony Warner was the goalie. Celtic that day. Listen, thank you every single one of you. Yes, I know it sounds like a bit of a greeting meeting when we're talking about VAR, but it has to be covered. We need to call it out, and I think Brendan was right to call it out. Someone made a point just before we go. Brendan was very, very cute with his terminology. He said he was guessing, so he never used that word incompetent or cheat or anything. Just said they're guessing at it. So unless they can provide us with images to suggest otherwise, I think we've got a good case. Not that it helps us at the weekend, but moving forward, keep applying pressure to the officials. Let's improve the system that we've got. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. It's an absolute pleasure on a Monday afternoon. And thank you to Kevin Graham and also to Quinny for joining us on a Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you.